Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl Podcast, a 3-time award-winning show that aims to motivate and inspire you while increasing the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. If you're passionate about adventure, challenge and learning from women who have overcome obstacles and achieved remarkable things, then this is the podcast for you. Every Tuesday at 7 a.m, new episodes go live featuring incredible women who share their stories, insights and tips to help you achieve your dreams and goals. You can support the Tough Girl mission by signing up as a patron. Visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Keep listening until the very end as I share more information about what's going on with me with Tough Girl Challenges, give shout outs and recommend other Tough Girl Podcast episodes. More information can be found at toughgirlchallenges.com.
My name's Bailey Steamer. I'm a mental health advocate, and from the 18th of May 2022 to the 23rd of July 2023, I hiked the east coast of Australia. That journey was over 5,500 kilometres and raised over $100,000 for the Black Dog Institute, which are mental health researchers here in Australia. This journey started well before these dates. This journey was inspired by my own mental health journey. And for me, that started when I was about 14 years of age, when I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And that was a really tough diagnosis as a young person. I didn't do anything wrong necessarily. There was no triggers or trauma. Unfortunately, I was one of those classic genetic cases. And I was really lucky that I had a wonderful, supportive family. Again, that sounds a bit odd to say that. I was lucky to have people that understood mental health around me, but really it was a very crucial part of my journey in the sense of accessing support such as psychologists and psychiatrists. I was a really good kid, but unfortunately I was averaging about 42% attendance at school. And no matter how hard I tried to connect socially and academically, managing this chronic mental illness was a just all-consuming thing in my life. And just because I was a young person didn't necessarily mean that I got a watered-down dose, so to speak. I was managing a completely adult chronic illness, but as an adolescent. So you can imagine the challenges there. It wasn't until, though, I went to uni for the first time that I experienced my first ever manic episode. So going from a depressive state, I didn't know what was happening to me, obviously, because I was undereducated and didn't really understand what bipolar meant at the time. I started excelling academically. I was the life of the party. You know, all of those classic manic factors and focuses were there. I just didn't know how to recognize them at the time. And like Newton's law, you know, what goes up must come down. I finished up my 6 months at uni in a crushing depression and had to move back home, and went in to see my psychiatrist at the time. And I sat down on her couch, and I can still remember her, you know, going, "What's going on?" And me going, "Oh, look, I'm in another depression, but I have to tell you about the last 6 months I've had. You know, I just had the best time ever." And, you know, I was really proud to be able to tell her that I had this window of life where I felt like I was actually living. And I can still remember her face just going from that, you know, warmth to concern pretty quickly. And by the end of the session, she said to me, "Look, Bales, you know, I think you might have bipolar disorder." And I went, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, I think, sweetie, that you might have bipolar disorder. I think we've been mistreating you with depression for the last 7 years." And I remember looking at her and saying, "Take it back." She went, "What?" I said, "Well, take it back." She goes, I don't understand." Like, "Well, if you take it back, I walk out of this office the same woman that walked in. If you don't take it back, you know, I walk out of here as this monster." And she went, okay, I take it back. 3 weeks later, I was back in and on that couch going, "Look, call me whatever you want, you know, just make me better." And I really wish that was the hard bit of this journey, of this, you know, my personal and mental health journey and the walk, but it really wasn't. It was just the beginning. And a few months later, I made the really, really difficult, but one of the best decisions I'd ever made, which was to go into a mental health hospital. And why that this is all relevant and why I'm expressing this with you guys today on this podcast isn't necessarily because I want sympathy or empathy or anything of that nature. It's just to highlight the actual significance of the walk and the achievement in it. You know, it's not just the hiking, it's not just the kilometers, it was actually the place I came from and how it all came about, which makes it so significant. So yeah, anyway, I'm in this hospital, which was exactly where I needed to be at the time, even though I didn't want to be there necessarily. And I had and a wonderful healthcare team, this really multifaceted approach around my healthcare and around me. But I was still struggling and I still felt like it was always, two steps forward, one step back. And, I'd never been a long distance walker in my life. I think the longest I'd ever walked prior to that was about, an hour with the dogs on the beach, so to speak. And this one morning I woke up and I was just really frustrated with my circumstances. I really felt like everything was out of my control and, there was just a big injustice around the whole situation and that I shouldn't be in this situation. I'd done nothing to deserve it. All those classic victim mentalities. And I'm not trashing on myself. It just genuinely was. I was just in a really, really bad place. And, I felt like it wasn't fair. I woke up and I went, you know what? I'm going to do something. And I don't know why my brain came up with this concept at the time, but I put on my shoes, like my Connies, which we all know are the best walking shoes ever. I put on my Connies, I put on a backpack, got a bottle of water from the nurse's station, and I left the doors of the hospital at 8 a.m. and I walked all the way to my family home, which was 30 kilometers from the hospital, and finished at 4 p.m. that afternoon. I have to express the significance here because prior to this, I'd never done any long distance walking. I was in a constant state of misery and pessimism and depression. And I felt like I was worthless and hopeless and there was nothing I could do right. So to achieve something that I felt was quite large scale, which 30 kilometers to somebody that's done no training, kind of is. It's not just for somebody that's struggling with an illness, but for people in general. I was really proud of myself. I felt like I had actually achieved something for the first time in a really, really long time in a cycle of starting things and failing and quitting and stuff of that nature. My family was saying, they're going, how did you get here? Did you catch a bus? Did you get a taxi? I was like, I walked. They're like, no, bullshit. How'd you actually get here? I was like, no, I walked. And they were really pumped about it too. So it was this common, I guess, goal where people would suggest these long distance hikes for me, like, oh, when you get better, have you heard of the Camino or the this or the that? So then walking became a really important part of my healing journey. So it wasn't uncommon for people to see me around, my local area on highways or beaches or everywhere in between and in the middle of nowhere. And people were like, oh yeah, check out Bailey, the weird walking lady. I wish that was the flat line and that was where, everything started to go uphill. But we all know that recovery isn't that. It's never a flat line. It's always ups and downs. It was in this year that I spent about 7 months in this psychiatric hospital off and on out of the year. Even though I was doing my best and we were all doing our best to get me well, it was still this unrelenting depression that we just couldn't get on top of. And it was when my psychiatrist suggested to me, I think, Bailey, you're eligible for ECT. I'm sorry, sweetie, but you're one of our severe cases. And for anyone that doesn't know what ECT is, it's electric convulsive therapy. It's not quite like the horror theme movies that you grow up with, but it is still a very severe treatment. It's a mild electric current that's put through the body in the hopes to ruffle the emotive feathers of the brain, so to speak. Causes a mild seizure. Basically, it's done under general anesthetic. I was so desperate to be well. I would have offered up my left and right arm at this point. I didn't care. Just make me better was kind of my mindset. If there was such a thing as better anymore. I'd been managing for nearly a decade at this point with very little relief. And so I said yes, even though it terrified me and even though that some of the worst side effects could be, memory loss and death, I was still desperate. So I think out of this treatment, I had about 25 rounds, 3 times a week for about 5 weeks. I was put on general anesthetic. Why this is relevant is because this actually leads into how I had the idea to walk the East Coast itself. So I was in this waiting room for the first treatment ever that I was going to receive. And I was terrified. That real cold sweat, bottomless pit gut fear that you get where you can't speak, you can't do anything except just sit there silently, kind of shaking and crying a little bit. I had that true terror. I've only experienced that a few times in my life, and that was one of those moments for me. I remember sitting there in this waiting room, and then I kind of looked up. I don't know why, but for the first time, I actually realized that I wasn't the only person in this waiting room. And across from this waiting room on the other side, there was this girl. She was about my age, and she's also, in this waiting room for the surgical unit in scrubs, ready to go. And she looks like how I feel. I can just see in her face that she's terrified. We're both terrified. I just felt this sadness and this overwhelming urge to go and sit with her and tell her that everything was going to be okay, that both of us were going to be okay, and that everything was going to be all right. And then I felt this almost sadness / frustration because I recognized that I couldn't actually tell her that because I didn't believe it. And I didn't think that either of us were going to be okay. I'd never known anyone that had been in a mental health hospital and gone on to do successful things. I didn't know anyone that had had ACT and similar sort of concept. I didn't know if either of us could hold down jobs or have families or do any of the normal run-of-the-mill things that many of us take for granted. That feeling kind of morphed into this frustrated injustice feeling. How unfair was it that this beautiful young girl who had done nothing wrong to be in this situation, and all the beautiful people behind me in this hospital that we were in, who had done nothing, were just good people that were just suffering from conditions outside of their control. I just felt like it was a major injustice, and that there had to be something good that came from all this pain. This just couldn't be it, for myself, this girl, and all these people. So I decided in that moment that I was going to do something, and I didn't know what it was going to be. I was really racking my brains. Okay, yes, we have to do something. We have to do something that some of this pain can turn into something good in the world. There has to be a point for all of this, even if it's not for me, even if it's too late for me. Like, I have to do something with my life to make other people's lives a little better. And so I'm going, okay, well, what can we do, Bailey? Like, you're literally in scrubs in a surgical unit. You don't have a job. You don't have anything that you can really contribute. And my brain, for some reason, conjured up the thought, well, we can walk. We're pretty good at walking. And just like that, I was like, oh, yeah, I am pretty good at walking. I walk when I'm well and when I'm unwell. It doesn't matter what state I'm in. Doesn't matter if I'm catatonically unwell and feel like I can't shower or get out of bed, I can still walk. I've proven that to myself time and time again. So then I'm going, okay, well, where are we going to walk? It has to be something large scale. We have to deliver this message that there's life worth living. We have to contribute in a positive way and show people with mental illness, not just tell them, but show them that there's life worth living and we can achieve great things. Going, okay, well, what about the East Coast? And so in that moment, there was just this floodgate, this momentum of thoughts. Man, well, my brain was going, yes, like crazy, but it might just work. It was actually when I was laying down on the bed in the surgical unit about to be put under by the anaesthetist that I turned to him and I said, I'm going to walk the East Coast of Australia and I'm going to do it for the Black Dog Institute. And he went, okay, sweetie, go to sleep. All right, honey. But when I came to, I told everyone, like, I was really sold on it. And the beautiful part about that is that nothing had changed in my circumstances, really. The only difference is that I now had a goal. I had a purpose. I had something that I was going to work towards. And, I wouldn't be the first person managing bipolar disorder to have this grandiose idea, but it was the game changer for me. And I really did believe in myself, I guess, enough to do it, even if it wasn't for me, but for other people. And here we are, 5,500 kilometers, Tough Girl podcast later.
And the word that springs to mind is just that I love the fact that you had so much compassion, when you're in that waiting room and, like not looking at yourself, but, looking at the other person and thinking, well, how can I make a difference? How can I turn the pain into good, and focusing, well, actually, I can walk, and I can do it when I'm well. I can do it when I'm unwell. It really does make me giggle a little bit when I can imagine you lying on the table just before the anaesthetist is putting you under. You're like, yeah, I'm going to walk the East Coast of Australia. It's like, yes, sweetie. Okay. You go to sleep now.
Good night, darling.
Yeah, have sweet dreams. But
yeah,
but that's almost, I think the next step, like you said, like this is a big goal. This is a Australia is a massive country and,
Huge.
huge, 5,000 plus kilometers. But, the following morning or the following day, what sort of steps did you start taking? Like, how easy was it to say to your family, to the healthcare professionals that you were working with, like, this is what I want to do. This is going to be my start date, and actually move it forward so that you could be on that start line walking and feel supported and ready. And you may not necessarily have felt supported already when you started off, but how did you get from the idea to the start line?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it is one that I get a few times from people, because it's that constant step between the thinking and doing part that people get stuck on. For me personally, I've always been quite verbose. I've never been necessarily shy in sharing my ideas with people. I was always affectionately nicknamed a chatterbox. So being able to talk to people about it wasn't necessarily hard. The difficult part was people understanding how genuine, I was in my actual actions of doing it. So I think there's a couple of things that I used as really helpful tools, which anyone can either pick up or put down, no pressure. The first one, as you mentioned, was talking to people about it. So basically I talked to my nurses, my family, my friends, anyone that would listen. I would discuss what I was planning on to do and why and when. And a lot of people would give that glazed over look of, okay, sweetie, that's nice. And the fact that so many people, where I've been so unwell for so long, they were just so joyous to see me animated about anything. So it was like, people would throw me a bone, so to speak, being like, oh yeah, that's great, tell me more. But no one actually thought I was going to do it. I really liked talking to antagonists about it, people that genuinely didn't think I was going to do it and didn't just necessarily keep quiet about it either. The reason is that I found their criticism and their nitpicking actually very helpful in the planning process. So if you've ever had that friend, that auntie, that neighbor, whoever, that you'll give a plan to or a goal and they can't help but say something negative about it, oh, but what are you going to do here? Or what about this? Instead of taking that as like, they're shooting me down, I took it as an opportunity to work on my plan. So for example, people would say things like, well, where are you going to sleep? And I'd go, well, I'm going to carry an ultralight hiking tent. And then they'd go, well, what are you going to eat? And these sort of questions, they were intending for them to be put down. But in my brain, it kept it active, going, okay, actually, yeah, I hadn't thought about what I'm going to do if this happens, or how I'm going to navigate this section that's hard. I need to put more energy and thought into that bit. So taking those sort of opportunities as not speed bumps, but times to pause, think and plan was really helpful. For me, the proof of concept part was really, really integral in the planning stage, because until I did this trial run from Coolangatta to Coffs Harbour, which I did a year after deciding I was going to do the East Coast walk, I've been talking a lot to people about what I was planning. But again, it was the same sort of glazed over, all right, sweetie, whatever you say. It was at the end of this semester, I did it nursing, where I finished up, and I had this weekend. It was in December. I was talking to my housemates about my plan, and all of a sudden I came to this epiphany where I went, you know what? If I don't do something to show people I'm serious, to demonstrate that I'm keen and that I've actually got a proof of concept about what I'm going to do, no one's going to take me seriously. And why should they? I haven't given them any evidence of my planning. So that Friday, I called up my dad and I said, hey, Dad, can you drop me to the airport on Monday? And he goes, yeah, kid, where are you going? I was like, I'm going to fly to Coolangatta and I'm going to walk across harbour. I'll be home in time for Christmas. Don't worry. And he said, Bailey, that's 3 days away. It's like, yeah. And he's like, you've never done an overnight hike. I was like, correct. He's like, that's going to take you about 3 or 4 weeks. I was like, I've calculated it. And he goes, you don't have any gear. I was like, no, I'm in Kathmandu right now. Don't worry about it. They're sorting me out. And so I went, okay. And I did it. I flew up there by myself. It wasn't for charity. I got everything wrong. I mean, everything from navigation to weather to planning to routes to literally my boots. Everything I did was incorrect. but it was one of the most important learning stages. It wasn't just about what my body could physically do. It was about understanding if my brain could psychologically handle the stress of that sort of environment. But yeah, when my parents picked me up the 4 weeks later, they opened up the door and I was disgusting. I like hadn't brushed my hair in weeks. I was smelly. I was injured. It was gnarly. And I looked at them. I got in the car and I said, I did it and I'm going to walk the East Coast and I'm going to do it. I'm going to leave on the 17th or 6th of May. And I still remember my parents looking at each other and just went, shit. Like it was like the penny dropped. It was from that moment on that other people took me seriously, but more importantly, I took me seriously because I'd done something to demonstrate how dedicated I was to it. Yeah. So I'd say those sort of things were really important as far as that, the next step. Talking about it, it really does create that accountability, not feeling disheartened when people have negative things to say about it, because that's going to help with planning and problem solving. And then a proof of concept is always really key as well.
How are you planning to manage your bipolar disorder while out on the adventure? Did you have a plan in place that you'd sort of discussed and agreed with your healthcare professionals before you left? Did you have sort of certain parameters or were you on medication? You know, how did that work?
Yeah, it's a really good question because taking any sort of chronic illness on the trail, whether it is mental health, whether it's diabetes, whether it's asthma, it's always going to come with different criteria as what your healthcare plan looks like and problem solving and pre-planning is going to look like. For me, I did take medications, so I always had enough medications with me. I take lithium and dithiapine, which is an antidepressant as well. I do say those out loud because some people get a little bit cagey about it. But for me, you know, I wouldn't have any problem discussing if I was on insulin, if I was type 1 diabetic. So for me, medications is an important part of my healthcare routine. I had all my healthcare team notified of what I was doing. They were all in absolute awe and probably a little fear at what I was undertaking, but they all knew and they were all on board and available through telehealth prior to leaving. I think one of the most naive things about it for me was I think deep down I was hoping that because I was doing something for charity and for such a good cause that my bipolar would leave me alone, would just give me like a 12-month window, you know, of good grace, being like, oh, she's got enough on her plate. But no, that was naive. Of course it doesn't. Bipolar is one of the worst travel buddies to go with, but it was also a really important part of managing all these tools and developing all these techniques to deal with my illness was actually taking it with me because I learned how to walk alongside it instead of fighting it all the time and had to develop different strategies that when I was having bad days and mindset techniques as to manage things. And some I can even share with you in these podcasts if you're interested, which I feel like they're transferable to different things and ways of life and people, irrespective of what their mental health status is. But outside of that as well, I accessed mental health hospitals twice during this walk. The first one was when I was going through Newcastle for a treatment called TMS. TMS is a treatment I have when I manage depressive episodes, which have become far and few at the moment. Touch wood, like I've jinxed it. But basically, it's a transmagnetic frequency that's put into the brain and stimulates nerve cells. It's like a tapping, you know, you're awake when you get it done. It takes about 4 minutes and you can, you know, drive to and from the thing. It doesn't hurt or anything like that. It's a very non-invasive treatment style. And so I accessed that when I was in Newcastle. And then again, when I was in Townsville, I had to fly home for a couple of weeks to get that treatment and then fly back to my starting point in Townsville and finish off the walk there. So yeah, I had like a real network of options and support around me when I left. Well, I was trying to be as organized as I could be.
You talked about having, you know, sort of a bad day. And in terms of having a bad day, because, and this is not about comparisons, but for me, when I'm walking, you know, a bad day can be sometimes like when it's raining, when it's cold, when I've got a blister, when I've run out of chocolate, or I'm on my period, you know.
Yeah, all the good things.
all those sorts of things. But for you, when you're having a bad day, was it triggered by anything, or is it just something that maybe you didn't have any control? Was it ever sort of linked into the physical side of the challenge, or was it always just the mental, or were those two just so interconnected that there wasn't necessarily rhyme or reason for having a bad day?
No, so that's the thing with it is it's like I didn't get to just skip out on bad days because I got depressions too. It was like I just had to manage both. So I'm totally with you there. As far as the actual walk is concerned, the more time I put between me and the walk, the more I'm like, wow, that was so wonderful and everything went great. It's like that classic like trauma glazing you get. So for me, I used to have bad days for a range of reasons, as you mentioned. Blisters, really shitty weather. I don't know if you ever walked on the side of a highway with torrential rain and trucks spraying you and thorns and everything. Like just some of the stuff in that sense was awful. Going without food, being injured, being tired, being stressed. I've been rescued out of a national park once with a bad concussion. Like I've had those sort of bad days definitely as well. The fatigue of walking really hard distances and having to bush bash through bad terrain. Like even mentioning all these things now, I'm like, but the depression side is it's just a different feeling in itself. So one of the frustrating things about depression is that it can be exacerbated by high stress and prolonged stress. Well, for me anyways, especially. So you can imagine a high stress hiking trip, like what I went under, would make me very vulnerable to being, susceptible to those sort of really low moods. For me, I like being in a situation. I know it sounds really messed up, but I like being in a situation when something is wrong and I can pinpoint it. Like if I rolled my ankle and I'm hobbling along a soft sand beach with a big 20-kilo pack and I'm crying and I'm miserable and I'm in pain and everything sucks. I know that those emotions and those things that I'm feeling, they're relevant, they're real, they make sense circumstantially and environmentally of what's going on. So I had a lot of those days and it's nice to be able to pinpoint. Some experiences though, when I'd wake up and I'd be in a beautiful location and, everything could be going really right and I would be crying and I'd feel that grief like somebody, I cared about had passed away. That's depression in a sense because there's no rhyme or reason for it. It's just a mood inconsistency. And so I would be navigating those sort of episodes and also navigating all the hardship that's relevant to the hiking space and industry, So there was quite a few really hard patches for me. But I guess as you develop insight into different things, it can help you navigate those spaces, which is definitely something that I tended to develop along the way, especially that self-kindness and self-awareness. So for example, when I would be having those really bad depressive days, I'd go, you know what? Just sit here by this river and just enjoy it. Buy a chocolate bar and just, feel how you feel, but let's maybe not add more to your plate while you've woken up in this way. But else let's not climb the mountain today. Or for example, I would be depressed and I would be on the side of the mountain going, oh my God, I can't do this. And then I'd climb that mountain and go, oh my God, I just did that. Yeah, it really did depend, but there was definitely a spectrum of emotions, both depressive and, just relevant to hiking and being uncomfortable for sure.
You mentioned that, sort of navigating through some of those like challenging moments, and you talked about, sort of kindness. What were the other tools and tricks or methods that you were using that you found worked for you? And were these things that you sort of picked up along the way? Were these things that, had been taught to you by medical professionals? What were you doing to manage those situations?
One of the big ones was understanding the difference between I can't and I don't want to. I'd used those phrases interchangeably for most of my life. And there were many a days that I felt like I couldn't get out of bed or couldn't shower when I was struggling with mental illness, especially in my teen years. And for anybody listening who's managed mental illness, there's probably a lot of heads going, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. But I actually learnt this lesson when I was on 90 Mile Beach, which is it's Australia's second largest beach. It's a beach in Victoria. It's 144 kilometers long of just uninterrupted sand. To me, it's just hell on earth. Like it was so hard. And it took me about 5 days. It's nothing but soft sand and an incline into the ocean. There was a blue-green algae outbreak at the time, so I couldn't get near the water. It was like -2 overnight time. I had a 20-kilo pack. Like it was just a recipe for disaster. And it was about day 3 into this walk. And I was in so much pain from sun up to sun down. And there was just mirage on the beach. It just felt like I would pick a point and I'd go, just walk to that point. and I'd walk for an hour and a half and the point would move and I'd be like in the desert, be going insane. And there was about day 3, I just sat down on this beach, I still remember it. Sat down on this beach and I just started crying and yelling and cursing. And I just was, I said the words. I'm like, I quit. Do this anymore. I can't. It's too hard. Can't. And I laid down and just wanted like the sand to swallow me up. And, half an hour later, I was still there. And then an hour later, I was still there. And even though my brain had genuinely told me I couldn't do it anymore, physically, mentally, just could not get past this point, I realized that if I stayed in that moment, I would be in the position and in the place that had been hard enough and bad enough that had made me want to stop in the first place. And I could stay there and starve, or I could just keep going, even though my brain had literally told me that there was just no other option. I couldn't do it. And I did. I got up and I kept walking. And, at the end of my 5 days, I looked back and I went, wow, I'd literally been told by my brain and my entire being that I couldn't do that task. And here I am at the end of this task. I wonder what else I tell myself that I can't do that I actually can. And so that opened a lot of doors for me as far as managing really tough moments and really hard and challenging positions, because it was like, hey, there's a difference between I can't and I don't want to. And it's both are okay, both are completely relevant, but just, don't use them interchangeably. It was actually during this section as well that I developed the tantrum timer, which I've been told that some people use at peak hour traffic. But basically what it is for me is it's just a tool that I developed in that moment when it was really hard, where I put a 7-minute timer on my phone and I would give myself complete permission to fall apart. I would kick, I would scream, I would swear, I'd belt my bag. If you've ever seen a 2-year-old throw a tantrum at a Coles supermarket, it's that, it's not pretty, but I would just let it all out and I wouldn't feel guilty about it. Everything I was thinking and feeling. And then when that timer went off, I'd pick myself up and I'd brush myself off and I'd keep going. And I found that helped from getting to those breaking points, because it was almost like just tipping a little bit out of the bucket versus just toppling the whole bucket over. And sometimes I'd need 10 a day. But yeah, that was just, for example, a strategy. I'm just trying to think of other strategies. Another one I developed was the rocks in my shoes and creating kind of like a negative feedback loop, but being able to problem solve it. So if I was walking in a really hard place, if I was physically injured or mentally struggling, I'd put small rocks in my shoes and then walk on those rocks for maybe 500 meters, maybe a kilometer. And in the moment before the rocks, I'd be thinking, oh my God, this cannot get any worse. This cannot get any harder. I can't do this, blah, blah. And I put the rocks in, and then all of a sudden all I can focus on is how sharp and annoying these rocks are in my shoes. And then after a kilometer, I'd sit down and take off my boots, shake out my rocks and put them back on. I go, how much better is that? All the circumstances are exactly the same prior to the rocks, but I've just almost lightened my load a little bit by creating this little false feedback loop for myself. Yeah, so that's an example of some of the stuff that I developed along the way. As far as the positive sides, and being kind and gentle to myself, that really was important to me. Learning to be okay with myself and learning to forgive myself and accept myself, especially when you're by yourself, because there's no one else to bounce off. It's just you. So I used to do things like create a pocket of pleasure in my day, whether that was a chocolate bar, whether that was a beer at a local pub I walked past, if I could, whether that was an audio book, just something that was just for me, for no other purpose than making me feel good. And, that's something I still do now, maybe a little bit too much with some of this winter love handles I've got going on at the moment. But yeah, so those are just a few.
Thank you for sharing those. I think it's always really interesting just to hear different techniques. I don't think I have ever heard putting rocks in shoes. But actually, I can understand, what you're doing and how that would work. And I suppose it's almost look, it's a physical way of reframing it.
Yeah.
So, if I'm walking and it's raining, then sometimes I'm like, well, at least it's not snowing. Well, at least the wind isn't blowing. At least I've got a waterproof jacket on, just anything to make it sound better. And actually, in a weird way, I mean, I'm not sure I'd ever stop to put rocks in my shoes but then I can see actually walking 500 meters as soon as you take them out, be like, oh my God, yeah, this is actually so much better.
So much better. Again, I wouldn't necessarily put that out there for everyone to do because, the like worst thing you need is just somebody getting a small chipped off bit of rock embedded in their foot for the rest of their hike. But for me, there was just so many moments that because it was such a long, long slog for it that I had to just get these little things going or I'd go completely insane. So a lot more insane. But yeah, so the rocks in my shoes were very helpful. Just anything that was kind of a little bit proactive, instead of waiting necessarily for things to go really, really bad and then reacting to those really bad things, seeing a direction stuff was heading in and then being like, okay, what can we do? Even if it's just temporary, even if it's us just tricking ourselves a little bit, what can we do to navigate and manage this situation? Which I think was a helpful mindset. And it's still a mindset I have now, that hasn't changed necessarily.
How are you mentally being alone? And I'm really interested in this because so I love it. I love my own company. I think I'm hysterical, great company. I need that like almost like that deep thinking time. And don't get me wrong, occasionally it's really nice to, to have some like social interactions and to feel like a little bit like part of like a trail family or, something like that, or to, to connect with families or, connect with my family or look at photos or something. But I also know from other people that actually, and I don't know that how much this is related to mental health, but actually for some people being alone with their own thoughts for prolonged periods of time is not necessarily a good thing. How was that for you when you were on the more sort of isolated sections of the walk where maybe, you didn't have people, there wasn't people around you, it was just you in the wilderness by yourself, pushing on through and having to do bushwhacking and, whatnot to get through, what was happening mentally? Like, are you good in that space? Not good? Is it just, again, like, is it a spectrum?
Look, for the most part, I'm kind of like you. I love my own company. I've always loved my own company and I really enjoy listening to music. I've always been in that space as well. It does vary. I think anyone can be trapped in a good mindset, right? Because that's when the brain's at its optimal. There's something hard about being trapped in a bad mindset or being by yourself when you're problem solving through like a difficult, challenging circumstance. So I think this is another thing that I kind of struggled with in life prior when things had gone poorly, which is again, like I reflect on myself. I'm not always going to be the hero in everyone's story. I'm not always going to be doing the right thing all the time. We all make mistakes and, we're all learning all the time. But I think prior to the walk, I was pretty bad for if things went wrong, being able to put it on something else, being able to either not necessarily blame others or blame circumstances or whatever, but being able to not necessarily take it completely on board for me. But I'm sure you've been in a situation yourself that when you're out hiking and something goes wrong and you're by yourself, you've got to make a decision or you've made the wrong decision and there's no one else to put it on or anything other than yourself. It can be really hard coping that and learning how to take self-criticism and not, you know what I mean? It sounds weird, but that was something that I struggled with, was making decisions on my own and then making mistakes on my own and having to problem solve that and then, rationalize it with myself and not get really angry with myself and not hold on to it. So that was hard. And then sometimes if I was walking as well, my brain would just regurgitate these like random memories and thoughts of things that I'd done or said. And sometimes the more you're trying to quash down thoughts or memories, the more your brain pops them up. So there was even times on my walk where I had a lot of time to reflect on things like friendships and workplaces and, whatever. And I would get on the phone or send out a message to somebody from year 8 being like, hey, when this happened, I just wanted to message you because I've gone over that in my head a few times and, I just wanted to say sorry if anything I did or said or whatever. And then you get these messages back from people going, what the hell are you even talking about? Like, I can't even remember that. So that was something that was hard, was almost like having too much time to think. And 14 months is a really long time to just sit in your own space and your own thoughts and in your own head. But I think a lot of it was really helpful and really positive and helped me develop better relationships with myself and others and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it can be a little bit of I don't want to say like a whirlpool, but I feel like, I don't know whether you know what I'm talking about when I say that, but yeah.
I think I process in a very different, well, in a similar way, but a different way. As in, like, I don't think I'd ever, if I had reflections or thoughts back on things, I don't think I'd ever like send out a text message or anything. I'm almost just like, let it go, let it go. I was just like,
all frozen.
yeah. And I'm physically moving my arms now. Like, it's like I'm pulling the thoughts from my head and like throwing them away or like accepting them. And then it's like, okay, thought about that. Okay.
It's on. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. Look, I've said the same thing to my friends and family. They've had a similar opinion to you where they've gone, like, no, who cares? It's just in the past. It's all good. Just move on. Yeah.
Yeah. I just be like, no, what do I want to come from this? It's like, do I want to be friends with them again? I'm like, no, I don't know. Oh, no.
I'm out. Done.
I'm
Love
done.
it.
I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah, it's self-preservation in that. I respect it.
14 months away. How were you funding this? Did you have savings that you could rely on? Was it donation led? How did the financial side of things work?
Yeah, so I worked in the mines for about a year before doing COVID testing in Mudgee. So basically that set me up pretty well for the walk. My mindset with that was I wanted to have funding enough that even if nobody got behind me, if I had no support or no backing, I'd be able to get out there and do it. And I liked that feeling of independence and safety net. So a lot of it was self-funded. I had sponsoring from a couple of really beautiful businesses around my area. I had a GoFundMe account, which I did for things like medical supplies and equipment. That went pretty well. So people donated into that too. Yeah. And then the rest was just incredible generosity along the way. I cannot in any way express how beautiful humans were to me. People that didn't know me from a bar of soap, were just amazing. Like I would walk into, this just used to happen all the time. I would walk into a grocery store covered in mud, pack, smelly, dirty, and people would be curious, always going, what are you doing here? Like, where are you going? And I'd explain what I'm doing. And they'd go, where are you sleeping tonight? And I'd go, oh, I'm going to camp in the bushes somewhere. And usually I'd be in the middle of nowhere, something. And people are like, oh, there's no way you're doing that. I have a farmhouse that's 5K down the road. Like, just stop in there and we'll put you up for the night. We'll feed you and this, that, the other. So that sort of stuff used to happen all the time where people would just take me in as if I was a part of their family or their friends, feed me, clothe me, bathe me, like all the loves and the luxuries. And when I say luxuries, I mean like clean clothes and food. But yeah, all the good stuff. But that used to happen all the time where people would just literally, strangers would just take me in off the street, which again, there's safety precautions with that. But yeah, I was really lucky from people just being super, super kind. And that helped with the finances a lot.
I mean, you've had like a year to process now, I suppose, and look back on it. And, what are some of the main memories that still sort of pop in your head occasionally, whether they are, magical moments, the highlights, reaching a certain point or, like an emotional achievement, a physical achievement, yeah. What are the things that when you reflect back on the whole journey that really stand out for you?
Look, the people for me, again, were a massive highlight. Like I did a lot of community access stuff with mental health. So I did a lot of public speaking in schools and community groups and hospitals, things like that. So those sort of experiences will pop up in my mind and people will pop up online, that I've met along the way and go, I had my baby or I just got into year 10 or, whatever it is. And people that, follow along with the Wandering Minds, I sort of can go, oh yeah, there's people from that caravan park or wherever. So, people that I've like hugged and that we've cried together and laughed together and had those sort of moments have just been amazing. Especially around mental health and sharing in that space was just incredible. some of the natural wonders that I saw were just out of this world, like coming face to face with cassowaries and stuff, which sounds really majestic now, but like when it happens, it's just like the most surreal thing where you go, oh my God, is this dinosaur bird going to kill me? I'm having sunrises where I'd wake up on these like pristine white beaches, no one around, dolphins like going on sunrise and just sitting there with a cup of coffee and no milk going, wow, this is amazing. Just some of the stuff that I think back and go, how did I not die? Like I think about some of the river crossings I've done and seen and just some of the predicaments I used to get myself in physically that I think back to that and kind of shudder a little bit because at the time I didn't realize how much of a close call I got myself into. But with a little bit of hindsight, I go, ooh, that was a little bit too close. So lots of that sort of stuff do pop into mind. But again, as you said, 14 months is a really, really long time and 5,500 kilometers is a really long time to walk. I find that some of the best memories I have are some of the ones that I share with my primary schools that I either work in or visit and talk to. Because, like just some of the adventures / wildlife ones that they really like to listen to. Like I woke up with a fox in my tent one morning when I was in Victoria. And by morning, I mean, it was like in the night, really, really early morning. It was a full moon. And I thought that it was my dog back home on my feet because back here she sleeps on my bed. But I was in my like sleep state. And I woke up going, Olive, get off my feet. And then I went, wait a minute, I'm not home. And I sat up and here's this fox in my tent and me just going, look, I'm too tired to deal with this. And just laid back down and just like, don't bite me on the face. Like that's my only, it's my only regret. Like just don't bite me in the face. But you can sleep in here. I don't blame you. It's cold outside. So just stuff like that just is so surreal, but they pop up in the most random times. Like if I'm driving, I'll be in traffic and all of a sudden I remember being chased by emus and I'm like, wow, that happened. So yeah, that sort of stuff.
Adventure blues is a very common thing that is talked about sort of more and more. How did adventure blues work for you in terms of with your mental health? Like, is it the same, like an adventure blues? Like, did you feel like a big change when you finished, when you were going back, going from that transition of finishing the expedition back to, in air quotes, normal life?
People have been warning me about that a lot as I've been walking. So I was kind of geared for it. Oh, I'm going to be miserable when I finish, blah, blah, blah. I think by about 7 months into this walk or 8 months into this walk, I was just so beyond exhausted and so ready to be back home and comfortable again. That the additional, 7 months that I took or 8 months on the road, again, I loved it and it was all this incredible adventure and I got so much done and achieved so much in the mental health space. But on my bad days, I would just visualize about lying in bed with hot chocolate, with my dog, watching Netflix, because none of that was available to me. And so there was so many times when I'd be struggling that I would just think back and go, okay, no worries. Soon we'll have a refrigerator that works, food in it. And, we'll be able to have hot showers in the morning every day. So that was like a safe space mentally that I went to where I was like, soon we'll be home, we'll be safe again. And so when I got home and I was safe again and comfortable, I just went into this cocoon. I didn't really leave my house for about a month. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to do anything, not because I was depressed or anything. I just had been so uncomfortable for so long and I had done such a large scale adventure. I was just both like mentally, physically, spiritually, I was just exhausted. And so I didn't quite get that come down necessarily. And then by the time that it had been a few months, I'd planned a trip for myself to go to Rio for Carnival to go and see the world's biggest festival. That was something I've always wanted to do. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to do. So I had something to look forward to. Yeah. So I think that was really important in navigating that space, was like feeling comfortable again, having something to look forward to again. And don't get me wrong, it was weird. Like the transition was really weird, not having to get up and walk 40 kilometers every day. But I think I'd been looking forward to it and also had been mentally preparing for it to be really, really difficult. Whereas maybe other people that went on those adventures who hadn't been given that bit of advice from people like, hey, gear up, this is going to get really tough. Maybe that was something that they just didn't see it coming. So then it hit a little harder. But yeah, for me, it went all right. And maybe I'll do it reverse. Hey, maybe after another few months, I'll get that saddening, stuff from it. But for the most part, I was just really grateful to be home and be safe.
Are you still walking? Like, are you still walking now on a consistent basis?
No, not at all. So like I have spent a bit of time doing some walking, but it's nowhere near what it was before. I had honestly a little bit of trepidation getting back into the bush and getting back into hiking after I finished. It actually took me a couple months to get back out there. I don't know whether that was because of fear and anxiety because of the near misses that I'd had on my trip, and maybe it was a bit of a trauma association with getting back out there. But since then, I've just got out and just did it, band-aided it, took my beautiful assistance dog with me and, have been back out in that space and traveling a bit with it and enjoying it again. But yeah, it was definitely not something that I immediately went, I really miss that. I need that. I need to do it. My brain, if anything, went, oh, we've just got comfortable. We've just got safe. Remember that time that you nearly died? Remember that time when those things went really wrong? And so I think my brain kind of associated that. But I've worked quite hard on getting back out there and enjoying it again and doing it for the love of it, not because, I have to do it, but just doing it. I like it.
Always bringing it full circle, bringing it back to the walk and your reasons for doing this. And, especially in relation to building awareness around mental health. What is your message that you want to leave with people?
It's a really big question. And there's a lot of things that I really hope people can take from my walk and apply to themselves. Here in Australia, 2 in 5 will experience mental illness in a year. That's, nearly half of our population. So we have 47% will experience it in their lifetime. So that is half our population. And it's really sad to me that 50% of those people will never actually access treatment for mental health, because even if not all mental illnesses are curable, they're all treatable. And so with my actual walk itself, I wanted to express that people out there that are suffering, they're not alone in it. And that's a really common thing with mental illness, is that our brains will make us feel like we are alone and like we are hopeless, and it's incorrect, but it can feel very real. So the walk itself is to demonstrate that, we're not alone. It's something that affects so many people, that there's a life worth living within it. People like myself, for a really long time, I felt like this diagnosis and this label was who I was. You know what I mean? I wasn't Bailey anymore. I was bipolar. And now I'm really conscious of staying like I have bipolar, not I am bipolar. So for me, the message was about, expressing to people that they weren't alone, that there was support out there available if they wanted to reach out to get it, both tangibly in their communities and also digitally, and that there was no shame in accessing support and help, which is why something I'm so verbose about my experiences in mental health hospitals isn't because, again, I want sympathy or empathy. It's just because it's a reality, and it's a really essential service that we have here in Australia, but also on a global scale. And that, like the actual walk in itself, a lot of journeys with mental health and a lot of journeys with adversity in general, I feel like they need to be taken one step at a time, because when you look too far ahead, if you are constantly trying to do things to the grand scale of things, it can feel impossible, and you can get that analysis paralysis where you're like, oh, I can't do it. But if you break things down and take them a step at a time, which is actually how I did my East Coast walk, a lot of people went, oh my God, I could never do that. Like a lot of the time it wasn't, I didn't wake up in the morning going, oh, I have to get to the top of Queensland. It was going, okay, we have to get to the end of this beach, or we have to get 10 kilometers north. So breaking things down and just doing it one step at a time, very similarly in mental health, is really, really important. So yeah, I guess those are kind of the messages that I used to deliver.
Bailey, where are you most active on social media? Where can people find out more about you and the Wandering Minds Walk?
So I have a Facebook and an Instagram account. I'm getting better at social media. I'm not one of those duck to water sort of people with social media, but the handle for Instagram is wandering_minds_walk. And it is the same on Facebook as well. So that's where I get and put most of my updates. And I will be updating my website pretty soon as well, to deal with all of my motivational speaking work that I have upcoming. So if anybody's interested in anything of that nature, just head to the wanderingmindswalk.org online website.
Perfect. I'll put all the links to your social media so that people can find you, connect with you, and find out where you're next going to be speaking at. Bailey, I would love for you to have the final words of advice, final words of wisdom for other women who are maybe actually, just going through a really tough time, feeling pretty lost. What advice would you like to share? And you can take that in any direction that you would like.
I think there's a kind of beauty in understanding that everything will pass, whether it's good or bad, beautiful or mundane. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life. Everything will pass. So if something is really going really, really well for you right now, embrace it. If something's going really tricky for you at the moment, endure it, but just recognize that nothing in this life is permanent. And I think as well, we misplace fear, and we think that being afraid and being scared is the same as not being able to do something. But my beautiful grandma used to say to me that adversity is not in the absence of fear, but deciding something's more important than fear itself. So it's okay to be scared and to do it anyway. And that's how I did most of my walk. So again, if anybody's out there struggling at the moment, everything will pass. And if you're on the cusp of doing something but you feel like you can't because you're scared, sometimes you got to just do it anyway and be brave, even if we do feel a bit afraid about it.
Bailey, thank you so much for taking on such an incredible challenge. Thank you for all the incredible awareness raising that you're doing. And thank you for talking about your mental health journey in such an open and honest way. It will add just so much value and help other people who are in a similar situation.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Hey Tribe, thank you so much for listening to that episode with Bailey. What an incredible journey. What an inspiration. What a woman. What a story. Please do go and visit her social media. Please go visit her website, read more about it. Please do go and support if you can. Everything that we have talked about today will be available in the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com. So please do go and visit the website. I just want to take a moment to thank so many incredible patrons. And I have to hold my hands up. I've been just so slack at acknowledging the incredible patrons who are supporting the Tough Girl podcast. So I don't forget you. I appreciate you all so much. But Ellen Piercy, Tara Geiger, Zoe Langley-Watham, Dave Davis, Catherine Duferrer, Nikki Chisholm, Serena Broadway, Karis, Charlene Gibson, Emily Red, Gemma Smith, Hannah Wilde, Catherine Harrison, Lisa McCoy, Map and Map, Patty Culp, Rachel White, Rebecca de Farrags, Fargues, Sophie Cameron Mitchell, Vicky Royal, Adventure Virgin, Alex W, Ali Mahoney Johnson, Alison Lauder, Alison MacArthur, Amanda Dudgeon, Ari Kane, Shantae, Chloe Phillips Harris, Claire, Damiana Day, Miss Wombat, Donna, Eleanor Blockdy, Eleanor Griffins, Ellie Noe, N-O-E, Emily Nee More, sorry, Emily. Emily Nye Muhullior, Mhuillleoir, Emily Porter, Emily Buckles, Emma Zerona McDonald, Fiona Thompson, Flora Jones, Francois Chattanaiga, Chattanaiger. Thank you so much for all of your incredible support. It really does mean an incredible amount to me to have you as a patron to be supporting the podcast. And if you're listening to the Tough Girl podcast and you have gained benefit from it, it's changed your life in some way and you'd like to play it forward, then please do go and visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. And you can sign up. There's a bunch of different levels from $5 a month to $20, $25 per month, whatever it is that you can afford. It really does make a difference. It sort of gives me a monthly income, which is super useful to help me to budget and to plan and to make sure that I can cover the running costs of the podcast, the website, all of the behind the scenes things that do cost money when you host a podcast. Whew, don't know what else to say really, but thank you so much for all your incredible support. It really means the world to me. All that's left for me to say is wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.